Paku, before we say the kara, can we just check that we have got connection with you, because it's important for the full meeting as well. Are you able to speak to us? Can you just go? Oh, okay.
Yes, all
Oh,
okay.
we can hear you now.
Yes.
Well, that actually suggests now that we could have the kara here. So we've got a bit of calisthenics going on here. If you could lead us, please, that'd be great. Yeah.
Okay. Mā te whakapono, mā te tūmanako, mā te titiro, mā te whakarongo, mā te mahitahi, mā te whakamomore, mā te aroha, ka taea e mātou. And I'm going to translate that. By believing and trusting, by having faith and hope, by looking and searching, by listening and hearing, by working and striving together, by shared desire and determination, by all being done with compassion, we will succeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Paku. That's wonderful. Appreciate that, and I appreciate your offering to do that. Can I just, for the sake of the day, keep us moving? The apologies I have is one from Dally. John has indicated he will be late, and I'm not certain quite when he will join us, but at some stage he'll join us on screen. That's the two that I have. We've got a normal meeting today, so folk are okay to be here for the rest of the meeting, more or less. Okay. No, that's right. I'm getting there. Okay, we're getting there, Donna. Don't worry. Okay, if that's the case, I'll move from the chair that we sustain those two apologies. Thank you, Greg. Appreciate that. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, carried. Thank you. Right, we come to public forum, and we do have Mr. Teague here. I take it to talk to us. Welcome to the front. And Mr. Teague, you've got a presentation for us, which I'd appreciate. Just a couple of ground rules. We do try and keep this reasonably efficient. We've got, I guess, the thick end of 15 minutes allocated. So I'd ask you if you could try and restrict yourself to 10, so that I then have a chance to enable councillors to ask questions of clarification about your presentation, please.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Marina, and thanks for the opportunity. So my message this morning is that council and community face risks by prematurely embracing the seawall option for Thames without a thorough comparative analysis of all the alternatives. I want to deal with a few issues which lead me to that conclusion. The first is that Thames has subsidence, and it's all along the foreshore, not just at Monotiri. These are some of the measurements taken in past years and decades. So if we take the lowest of those, which is the one at Monotiri of 5 millimetres a year, that effectively doubles the local sea level rise rate. And we do this by reference to the NZ Sea Rise study, and the bottom dotted line is without subsidence at 2030. And the top line is with 5 millimetres of subsidence, and you can see that the difference is 0.2 of a metre, which effectively doubles the rate. So it really matters. This really matters. And if we then go to the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment's report, which looked at how often really like 1 in 100 year events would occur, then by 2030, with 30 centimetres of sea level rise, the 1 in 100 year event that we saw in Thames in 2018 would occur every 4 years, not every 100 years. And not only that, it would bring forward by 30 years at which that would occur if it were not for the subsidence happening. So you can see how this is really, really important stuff. And I want to show you this short video from Belinda Story. It's a presentation she gave to the Infrastructure Commission, talking about what impact I've just talked about has on the failure rate of sea walls in particular.
And if you think about the numbers that were incorporated in the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment's report in 2015, talking about the rate of change that we expect to see at our coasts and coastal floodplains, that's what the number looks like for our coastal floodplain.
Okay, so just to explain that graph she showed on her video, So this bottom line is the current situation, and that is that seawalls are currently, well, stop banks are built with a built-in design failure rate of about 40%. And the theory is that that other 40% should be covered by insurance. But she's saying that with those extreme events that we just talked about, then the failure rate increases to 100% by 2050. So in other words, seawalls are not foolproof by any means at all. And the second issue I want to raise is groundwater. So we do have a groundwater issue in Thames. And so the question I pose is, if we have a seawall, will that prevent groundwater flooding behind the wall? And we know that already in present day Thames, we get what's called sunny day flooding. So you have no rain and a high tide, and the water's coming up into the drains and particularly in the Grahamstown area. And we know that all along this coast, in the soil, there are contaminants, monotary, but also landfill at the Richmond Villas site. We have a closed landfill. And then we have buried pipes and cables, which are very susceptible to damage from rising groundwater, particularly seawater. And so the question I pose is, isn't there a possibility that we could have the need for retreat from these areas because that infrastructure has failed before the water even comes over a wall? So I think these are all quite serious issues we need to consider. And then the question of affordability. Well, perhaps not well known, but I know from my experience on the regional council that 75% of the cost of a stop bank is paid for in a targeted rate for those who directly benefit from it. And the other 25% is usually for the rest of the community. So the question then is, how realistically is it that that small number of coastal ratepayers will be able to afford that rate? And so, well, what if the government comes to the rescue? Well, they might, but then so every other small community around New Zealand who wants to see, well, we want government assistance as well. So the question of just how realistic this whole thing is. There is some hope and expectation, I suppose, that things might be improved by the managed retreat law, which is currently before Parliament. There's a select committee which is looking at it. There's been a promise of bipartisan support to that legislation. There's also an expectation that there will be some sort of funding available to communities like we saw in Hawke's Bay and Auckland with the recent Cyclone Gabriel. And there's also a hope and expectation that payments will be made before a disaster strikes. So there'll be a preemptive payout, so we don't wait for an event. So that's my conclusion, is that we need to keep our options open. We need to weigh the pros and cons of all of these options, and not just the first two. There are others such as climate leases and natural processes which need to be on the table. And just to look at those first two, realistically, both of them will require government payouts. And because there's still uncertainty with the new government and new legislation, why don't we wait until we know just what's available in terms of funding before we go down the path of committing to one option? And then I'll just leave these other thoughts on the screen. Just some other thoughts, particularly this one I think is important. The NZ Sea Rise people are bringing out new satellite data, which rather than having dots along the coast at every 2 kilometres, they'll be at every 100 metres. So if that's done for Thames, we'll have a much clearer picture of just what the rate of subsidence is. So I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
That's a very efficient presentation, so thank you, and great slides. Gary.
Wasn't it correct that some Dutch company, pretty used to dikes, did some estimate of cost for a wall tier? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. I think if I remember correctly, and this was Thames, Tararoo and Te Puru, I'm not sure whether it was Kopu, but it was something like $273 million.
And how long ago was that estimate?
That was done about 2 years ago.
So it's going to be.
And that was a pre-feasibility study. They admitted in that study that there were lots of things they left out. And they actually admit that they didn't take account of subsidence in that report.
Okay.
Any other questions? Yes, Peter.
So, Dennis, I think.
Your microphone, Pip, please.
So Dennis,
Yeah.
I think I understood what you're saying is you're not saying that a seawall is not an appropriate answer. What you're saying is we shouldn't be making a call at this point in
Yeah.
time about whether it's seawall
Yeah.
because of these other things.
That's right. I think, with all respect to the shoreline management, local panel, a lot of this information maybe was presented in a fairly once over lightly fashion, but there's a lot more detail to go into. And so, although the recommendation was for a seawall, they also did talk about retreat, by the way. I think we need much more in-depth analysis and comparative analysis of all of these options. I mean, when the shoreline panel considered its options, there was really no discussion about funding being available from the government for managed retreat, for example. So, we need a proper, not just a cost benefit analysis, but a full pre-feasibility analysis of all of those options to decide, what is the best option. Because I think if you had a scenario where there was funding available and it was something like 80 or 90% of capital value, there would be people in teams who would take that option now. And they haven't been given, that hasn't even been discussed with them.
Mm.
So, that's why I think we need to keep all those options open.
Could I just check three things with you, please, Dennis, if that's okay? Do you know when the better data comes out? There's always an issue we could, in terms of our planning, I think, because I'm obviously you're here at a good time in the sense of we're doing the long-term plan at the moment as a council. How long do you know how long it is before New Zealand Sea Rise come out with their improved data, the 100 metre spacing?
I'm not sure exactly, but I was shown a presentation because this data is available in England, and showed like the bank of the Thames or somewhere, and they could drill down to 100 meters and show that one area was slipping because it was right on the riverside. But I think it's not far away because the satellites are up there. It's just a matter of getting the data, the license to get the data and use it. But I'm sure a inquiry of Richard Levy or Tim Naish, I think Richard Levy may be in Antarctica at the moment, it would soon answer that question.
I would reflect a comment, and I'm interested in the two things. One is what is the potential future liability the council is, in a sense, potentially liable for building up with or without acknowledgement on our part. I would reflect that the Category C buyout requires not just government funding, but our funding as well.
Yes, that's right.
So your point's well made that, perhaps if there was a buyout at 80 or 90%, I think in Auckland it's 95, that they're offering, people might well take it, but it still requires a 50% ratepayer contribution.
That's right. I think the Auckland and Hawke's Bay precedent was 50-50 between
50-50, yeah, it is. Yeah.
That's
So,
right.
I'm not arguing against saying that. I'm just recognising from a planning perspective the sort of the contingent liability that we run with having with having these sorts of issues in front of us. Can you just go back to your early slide about? I'm just interested in your timing. I think you were talking about by 2050 about the seawall failure rate. I just wanted you to go back to that, please. Is that possible? Again, I'm just thinking about our LTP. We're thinking out 10 years. Our infrastructure strategy is 30. And I'm just interested to work out when you think the 1 in 100, which gives rise to the particular failure, could occur in your graph there, please.
Right. Well, I think when I've watched the whole video from Belinda's story, and what she says is that the failure rate is a failure once within that time frame.
Yeah.
So so she's saying there's a 100% probability of one failure at the current design level.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So, and that's why it's
Yes,
on the-
what we, that's the
current
significant.
standard.
Pardon?
That's the current standard over to the right. There's a
Yes,
40%
yes.
chance of
But is
failure.
that's a date on your bottom line here? I'm sorry, my eyes aren't that great.
So this is 30-50 here. That's
2050, yeah. So what you're essentially saying is with 2024, over the next 30 years, there is an increasing risk over the established parameters of which is that sort of almost linear line. And by 2015, we would be in the eye of the storm. Okay, that's great. Thank you. Any other questions folk would like to ask?
Yes,
please.
please.
Yeah, John.
Bruce. Thanks, Dennis, for your presentation. Again, you certainly keep climate change right in our minds. Hey, listen, just a point of clarification, others may know, but in your analysis, you talked about climate lease
Yeah.
and natural processes. What are they? What does that mean?
Right. Climate leases are again an invention of Belinda Story, which is seen here. And that's basically where the Crown pays out buys the freehold and then leases the property back to the owner on the basis that that they'll have to leave when things get bad. That's basically it. Yeah. So it's a way of sort of buying out the freehold and allowing people to remain there. Natural processes would be basically the use of wetlands. So if you took, for example, the Rhodes Park area, if that was to have a natural process applied to it, you would retreat to the state highway and then plant marshes and so on and allow that to absorb the force of the ocean. That's a
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Dennis, thank you for that. Can I
Thanks a lot.
just say firstly, Peter, you.
yeah, sure. I'll email them all around here.
I just want to say as a submitter and a member of the public in the sense, thank you very much for your preparation and the speed of the efficiency of your delivery. That's really good. You've got your message across. So
Great, thanks.
I'm appreciative that you've come well prepared and kept our time. So thank you very much for that. Dali.
And
Oh, Dali, sorry.
to that-
Rika.
and a link to that Belinda Story.
Sure.
Yeah, if you
I'll
could,
put-
that'd be great.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Thank
right.
you.
Thanks a
Appreciate
lot.
that. Right. Just looking at our agenda, I haven't been informed of any matters that we need to add to the agenda. You have got one you want to add, buddy?
I just wondered if it was appropriate with the Ombudsman's report about decisions and workshops, and Councillor Gottlieb has been raising that since that report came out, whether that might be appropriate to have a small discussion about that if time allows. I realise it's quite tight today.
Can I just hold that? All I'm trying to reflect here is that I should actually probably on her behalf just recognise Eileen's not with us. She's got a few matters she's dealing with and she's popping in and out, but I would be probably naturally looking to her to provide an answer to that. I'm not unopen to the idea if there was time to discuss that, because actually it really is important these days. Mr. Bashir has. So let's essentially I won't add it to the agenda, but if there was a possibility and Aileen was here, we could actually, yes.
Sorry, just to fill in part of the picture, LG&Z are preparing a position statement on a sector-wide for the whole councils on this, and it might be appropriate to hold off until that work's been done and discuss it at that point. It is important.
Yeah, because I mean, I guess it just sort of raises that, you know, we're sort of asked to give steers and general directions, and at what point do those steers and directions actually kind of become decisions? I think probably all the elected members would appreciate some guidance around that, because we don't want to fall foul of what we're supposed to be doing. Thank you.
Fair enough. Look, and that's a good point. So look, I'll thank you for that, Lynn. That's really helpful. I'm conscious that I have been in a meeting already this week where we've adopted a workshop policy, which is consistent with the reports that have come out from the Ombudsman's office. But look, Lynn, that's fair enough. Perhaps we can take it offline with Aileen and see where that's going. Are there any matters that you would need in the agenda coming up you needed to bear an interest in? No, that's good.
Through the chair, just in regards to items not on the agenda, I'm just wanting to highlight that there will be a table amendment to the annual report.
Okay,
That what that will show is any changes that we have had to make as a result of the audit between the time you got the agenda, so the draft or the version that you've got to the version that we currently have. There's not a lot, but there's a few things. So the team are just really busy working away on it now, and they will bring it in and hand it round when it comes to that item.
so in other words, we're dealing with everything in real time, which is actually not abnormal with a report. So appreciate that. You've noted that we will have a tabled amendment. I don't think we'll have any trouble receiving that on the basis that actually it gets us through being able to recommend adoption of the annual report, which would be valuable. We have the minutes of our meeting on the 26th of September. I'll move from the chair. We accept these as a true and correct record. Have a second, please. Thank you, Terry. Is there any discussion on those correct, as in accuracy, correction, or anything like that? I think it all looks pretty good to me. Okay. In that case, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. I did look through it to see about action points. There are some recommendations there for follow up and action, but as far as I can see, and I'm probably looking at Paku here, he's done some good work with his papers. I think generally they're followed up, so I'm comfortable that we are keeping on top of your requests that you have made through and are shown in those minutes. So that's great. Thank you very much. Right, Paku, great to have you here, buddy. And obviously, as is normal, a fair bunch at the start of the meeting's yours. So if I could get you with, please, introducing your risk report item 2.1, I'll hand over to you, please.
Yes, thanks, Bruce. Through the chair, a couple of things really. We have added a strategic risk that popped up on a couple of occasions during the workshop that we held back in August, I think, the risk workshop, and that is in regards to iwi engagement and participation, so I've included that in as a strategic risk, and we will undertake a deep dive risk assessment into that. It's fair to say I haven't been able to provide any deep dive risk assessments for any of the strategic risks, but that's in part due to the evolving changing government, etc., and just waiting for what where we head with their decisions and their policies. That's not to say that we haven't started work in the area, and the first two that we will produce early in the year for you to consider is the staff, which is at the top of the list, and weather event resilience. So we'll be doing those two. Other than that, I think the report speaks for itself. I've given brief update as you requested in regards to LTP, austerity and affordability, and you will be getting an update in regards to cybersecurity later in the meeting.
Thank you, Paku. That's very helpful, and do appreciate the fact that you've, as I said, addressed some of those action items. Folks, do we have questions for Paku or comments you'd like to make on the paper? Quite rightly, the cybersecurity one will be a discussion in PX. It should always be in PX, albeit that we should recognise publicly that we have as a strategic risk the matter of cybersecurity. Sorry, I cut over somebody. Was it you, Terry, or Peter? Peter, you got a comment?
Yes. Paku, I'd just be, I'd love to think it would be possible, but for you to give us some sort of timetable on the not yet assessed items, you know, where that fits in your work program over what period of time, you know, is it going to be 2 years, is it going to be 2 months, or whatever it is for each of those?
Yes, sure. Through the chair, Councillor, yes, absolutely, I can do that. And look, I'm looking to try to get them all done within the next 12 months, and you know, continue to feed to in each time we meet. So yeah, I can do that, absolutely.
Thank you, Peter. Any other questions? Actually, two questions, Paku. One is clearly wanting to look down the level of risk ratings, and not a lot of movement necessary unless I'm reading this right. I wondered if it would be reasonable to ask you, taking into account our risk profile, that's 1 through 11, what's the direction of travel around the council's general risk profile? Are we seeing things easing? Are they tightening up? What would be your advice to us on the risk profile?
I would say that things are tightening up in terms of. Are you talking about our management of those risks, or are you talking about
the
pressures?
I'm talking about the status and the pressure
Oh.
of those risks. Not, I mean, you've got the subsequent table where you've got a level of how you're going from a management perspective. I'm interested actually in the risk environment that we are operating in at the moment.
Yes, through the chair. Yes, I think my view is that the in some areas the risk isn't so tight. So, for example, areas like staffing is easing in terms of staff capacity and availability of staff. But it is certainly the pressure is going to be coming on for the other risks that we've got on there. So yes, things are, I think going forward, we're going to have to pay a lot of attention to these risks and really get to understand what they mean in our current environment. But definitely.
I just actually thought of a second question, but it may well be more your way, Donna. Strategic risk 8, we're starting to get a sense of direction of travel now, aren't we? With the 100-day plan put out by the government, we've seen the planned repeal of the Water Services Entity Act, etc., and also a return to the old RMA, if I can call it that. Donna, any sense of how that's impacting our planning?
So through the chair, it's a day by day thing. We, like in regards to like with the LTP, as you'll be aware that we, like despite the fact that legislation at the time when we were starting to do it said that we shouldn't have 3 waters in it, we made the decision to put 3 waters in so that we would be prepared, in case that came along. But in this regards to all the other changes that are happening, we are just having to be, as an organisation, we're just having to be flexible and being able to pivot really quickly as these decisions are being made and as they come to light. It's really a watch this space right now.
Critical thing is thinking about it, and I'm conscious that the receipt mantra, I mean, I actually don't disagree that is actually we have to be wary that what is legislated for is driving us. But I mean, the reality of it is what I'm hearing is that on the assumption the Water Services Entity Act and its other aspects are repealed, we are, and I'm making also the second assumption that actually there won't be an alternative other than we are where we are. We are able to meet that need of the extra information that actually exists. Yeah, okay, that's good. Look, and one other thing, I am very keen that, thank you for putting a target of 12 months. We're going to write that down in blood here, Paku. One thing I would like to just target, please, is that I'm conscious midway through next year, we will have fair wind behind us and adopted LTP. I would be very interested that at that stage, we take some time in a workshop open to the public, Martin, so we get, I'm very comfortable that the public hear this because actually it is important to hear what strategic risks we're managing, to check in how the priorities of our long-term plan as you settle on it match our strategic risks. Put it this other way, are we focusing on the right things? Because risk management is and governance is about dealing with uncertainty. What is the key uncertainty we face? Not achieving what we've promised the community. So I'm wanting to have that check back in around about June when it's appropriate. Actually, are these strategic risks relevant to actually what we're trying to achieve? Hopefully that's reasonably logical to everybody, but that'll be a halfway mark for next year. Terry.
I think this is an interesting conversation you're asking here to discuss, Bruce. We heard the other day that some councils weren't going to do an LTP. We decided we're going to do one, but we really are in a holding pattern, waiting for the government to decide the direction. So it is a confusing time, and it must be tough for finance to work through these things. And how we prepare for that is a great question. And I think Whaka is obviously looking at those risks that arrive out of it, but we are sort of hamstrung by the government at the moment, aren't we?
Well, yeah, I mean, we are, two things, aren't we? Under the Local Government Act, we have the power of a natural person, but actually our role is still heavily prescribed by statute. The statute says at the moment that we are going to move our water assets into a water entity. And yet we know from yesterday's announcements that won't happen. Well, cards are that it won't. The critical question is how flexible can we be? And perhaps that's what I was trying to test with Donna, is that actually we still have to have a 30-year infrastructure strategy that still involves 3 waters. We have got the numbers, so I'm not going to say it's easy, but it does suggest that actually, on the assumption that this government does live that 100-day thing, we will be ready. But it's interesting to know whether there's anything else they choose to pass that could impact on our long-term plan. Martin.
Yeah, just carrying on from your comment about how they'll maybe sort of in June next year, once the LTP is adopted, then we look at how that is reflecting our strategic risks. But I'm hoping that there would already have been an element of that in the long-term plan work that we've already done. It kind of seems a little bit like, why wait until June? I mean, I'm assuming we're not completely disregarding all these risks in our long-term plan discussions and work we've done so far. Please say that we're not.
Yes, so through the chair, you will see in a report later on our assumptions. So there's a lot of work in there around the assumptions that we're making for the long-term plan, and that should hopefully satisfy your questions, because there's all those risks and assumptions are actually included in that report.
Right. Okay. So potentially follow-up question. Potentially the thing that you're talking about in June is just sort of checking that, as opposed to.
Well, I think what I'm trying to say is in terms of the life of our committee, we're monitoring these technically every quarter. The question is, are they the right things once the LTP is settled for us to monitor?
Right. Okay.
Okay.
Thank
That's all I'm trying to do. There is a lot of this is a consultant speech now. I can make the argument that actually risk management is just good management. Okay, and so as we make decisions, including inside the LTP, we should have a very strong sense of risk management. Our thinking. I mean, if and I'm not, it's not for me to say what you want to take out of Mr. Teague's presentation, but if we're planning certain things on the foreshore of Thames as part of the LTP, we need to be thinking with a risk mindset as well, taking on board his stuff or anything else that we're doing. So yes, we should have a risk lens on every decision we make. What I'm trying to do here is that at the point that we get to the LTP more or less adopted, so I don't think we meet in May, it doesn't matter what it is, we could still do it then, because you're probably pretty well, hopefully, bar the shouting, you're pretty close to it. Here.
Just one quick point. Look, I think when we were Three Waters were moving out of council, there was quite a discussion around moving from infrastructure into more of a social wellbeing type of structure. So we've increased our look at economic development and going to the areas. Now three waters are coming back. We've still got two things in camp at the moment, and confusion out there in the field to say, are we pipes and things, or are we doing something else? So that's the confusion at the moment. We're in a bit of a middle road.
And I don't know how far we can take this, Terry, but that's actually a balance you as the decision makers have got to keep in mind. You've never not had the social, cultural and economic responsibility that's always, well, since the Labor government brought them back in, you've always had that responsibility. I think the point you're making is if pipes or water and if the three waters stay with us, it means that we have to make certain we've got also an adequate focus around that. We can't throw that off to somebody else. Okay, I wonder if we can keep moving then, please. The resolution is that we receive the risk report dated 1 November, but we've updated ourselves on it by thinking about it now. So that's it. Do I have a mover and a second, please? Thank you, Peter. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Rita. Appreciate that. Any discussion on the motion? Being none, I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Thank you, Parker. We'll look at your assurance report, please.
And through the chair, this report by and large is in response to a lot of the questions that we've received through the Assurance Committee meeting, particularly around procurement, providing the Assurance Committee with assurance around our procurement and contract management. And so what I've provided here is a insight into the review that we will be undertaking in terms of the procurement and contract management within council, and also what the improved procurement improvement work that one of my team members has been undertaken over the last 12 months. On top of that, it's fair to say, well, we've managed to secure a full-time internal auditor that will tackle our internal audit program, and just recognising that we haven't actually, we've made a start on the program, but it is well behind. That resource will be all hands to the pump to deliver on that for the Assurance Committee meeting. So any questions?
Yeah, look, that's great news. I mean, I think in fairness to my colleagues, we did sort of want to know that we could actually do some internal audit work. And I don't mean that, and I think that question was asked hopefully in a supportive way, but it's tremendous to read in the papers that you have got another person on board, which is tremendous. And it will be, that's comforting to know that we can do some, more consistent and regular assurance work. So well done on that one, Parku. But I have a question for Parku about the assurance side. It looks like you're about to break into song.
I've got a few, but I'll start with a couple. Like it was just as I read around the insurance policy changes, and I understand that it saves a poultice of money, 51,000, but it felt to me like the decision we're making around the insurance is not because we have certainty that there's a government policy that they'll pay 100%, but because that's just a behaviour we've observed and we're assuming it's a bankable behaviour. That kind of felt a bit risky to me.
Through the chair, that's fair to say, although I guess when you're looking at individual insurance claims, it's not such a risk. I mean, in terms of this, the insurance, our insurance advisors, Aon, have said that this is advisable, and they've done their risk analysis around that. Having said that, the Waikato councils across the board have taken this approach, and so I'm reasonably comfortable that the work has been done in terms of what is the risk, and that risk is tolerable. Without actually presenting you with additional information, I can't comment on that, but I'm fairly confident that this is acceptable risk from our perspective.
Peter, can I add at best half knowledge, but my other commitments in the Waikato have resolved, and it's not good reason for us to do it, but to not continue the sidecar cover policy. It's a one-off unique thing that the Waikato local authorities originally negotiated, but the recommend from Aon is just too expensive now to keep what is actually a very small policy in play. And it relates to, my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, Paku, it relates to the fact that when you have an initial claim with NEMA, there is a deductibility. And the sidecar policy was to cover that the deductible. It had only, in terms of this country, it had only been negotiated by the Waikato councils, but then Aon are now advising us that it's too expensive to keep. Now, while they will go out and buy the policy, if an individual council wishes to, essentially CoLab are pulling it from their collective negotiation. The recommendation is actually reasonable that we stop it. And does it make us worse off? Arguably it does. We take a wee bit more risk on, but we're no different to the rest of the country, quite frankly. Does that make sense? Is that helpful? Yeah.
This is why my theory is the more you can self-insure, the better. And being a council, we have the ability to do that sort of self-insuring up to a certain level.
Yep. And that's, and Gary, and that's exactly the point here, is that actually there is a deductible that we need to now think about actually how will we cover that. Now, that's not self-insurance, or arguably it is. It's keeping the liability, but it's a question about what do we do from here.
Through the chair, discussing Councillor Gottlieb's comment, we are looking to get our Aon insurers into office to review what we are insuring and potentially where we can make savings. Insurance it's a seller's market in terms of insurance, not a buyer's market. And so we need to be really mindful of what we do insure and what we self-insure. So that risk workshop will pave the way in terms of our thinking for the next insurance year.
Brilliant. That'd be great. And Paku, again, just starting to reflect a bit of a work program for this committee. I think it's within our remit to be interested in that strategy and to have an overview of it. It would be good at a relevant committee, I would suggest early in the new year, that we have, along with you, Aon, present to us on the insurance and the risk environment, and actually therefore some of the direction of travel that we could take to look at, do we have the right mix of risk ownership versus risk transfer? That's a good point. Any other questions for Paku? Yes, Peter.
Paku, in the procurement and contract management review, just in that, in item 4 about health and safety. So health and safety is dealing with contractors, a review by TCDC, health and safety, and feedback is provided where shortfalls are identified. My personal view, there's another side to that coin where feedback being provided where excessive what's the word I'm looking for? Where, where there's excessive, risk, there's, so what I'm thinking of, for instance, is traffic management. And I find it easy to say traffic management is absolutely over the top. And the contract, our contract service providers, our contractors, Ventia and so on, they bring in the traffic management to, mow a berm and what have you. And I understand the health and safety, but it sometimes seems excessive. And I just wonder, so there's two things in there. One is the whole thing about not just looking at shortfalls, but looking at where risk avoidance is potentially excessive. And secondly, are we as a council in things like, for instance, traffic management, just being hyper risk averse when it's actually, we don't need to be.
Through the chair, I think in terms of the procurement of the service, I think an initial review is different, is separate from the on-the-ground day-to-day, review. So they will provide health and safety in terms of full compliance, but what they do on a day-to-day basis is where we would, as contract managers, be reviewing their work from a health and safety perspective and asking the questions in regards to over-compliance, which is, I think, the question you're asking. That won't necessarily come through the procurement process. That generally appears throughout the contract. So my staff support the contract managers in reviewing how they then review what's happening on the ground on a day-to-day basis. And I think that's what you're highlighting is the day-to-day practices that are occurring, and whether that's they're over complying or they're not, they're going beyond what's required. Does that answer your question?
Yes, but that might be happening because of something that's put in the contract and the way things are put in the contract. So, but yes, that's where we end up seeing it, is on the guy mowing the lawn.
Through the chair, I'm not sure that the procurement contract would go into that much detail. The contracts generally, in the contracts they say is that they will abide by the requirements for traffic management planning throughout the term of the contract. What that traffic management means in each circumstance will be different. It's not a one size fits all. So they will have the standards that they in the contract. They will talk about the standards that they abide by rather than any specific way of doing it throughout the contract. I'm not sure that I'm making myself clear, but
that's fine. I've got that.
Yeah, I think, and as Parku has said it, is that I think we need to remember what Parku's setting out to do here, which is a procurement and contract management review, not a health and safety review. And I think we just need to be careful here, because I looked at this and I thought, gee, this is a big audit if you're going to deal with everything in depth. I think actually this is more, how are these components built into our total procurement and contract management review? And we need to keep in mind what this is. What it does say, Peter, I could have you've got a rich man for the number of meetings I've been in where exactly that same question has been asked. I think perhaps under a separate matter of health and safety, it would be quite good to have a greater understanding about what are the I'm about to say the rules, what are the settings, parameters around which things like traffic management are set. But we might leave that for a different day. Any other comments folk would like to make?
Just finally, on the auditor's recommendations, most of them seem to require additional funding. Is that additional funding provided for in our LTP?
Yes.
That's a good answer.
Yes. Well, what I mean by that is that's we need to approach whoever in terms of that funding. We need to make sure that it is requested through that process, through the LTP process or whatever process that we follow, or through. And I'm not quite sure. Are there any external funding in that? I'm just checking. Yes, through LTP.
Thank you, Peter. Is there any other questions for Parku? Parku, just a couple for me. I am interested in the cyclone debrief report and effectively the recommendations that come through that. So I don't have any direct comment on that other than, are you happy with progress to date?
Yes, very happy with it, to be honest. Yes, I've spoken with Gary and I'm happy that he's across the recommendations and they're happening.
Brilliant. That's
Absolutely.
good. Can you just help me here? I wasn't quite certain that I understood it. Under the TCDC procedural development, section 2324 of our papers, we've got a summary of existing policy, procedural and guidance improvement work underway. And improvements identified included reduce effort. Can you just explain what that means, please? So this is the
Yes,
last,
sure.
this is the last diagram on page 24. Sorry.
Yes, no, I've got that. So reduced effort is reducing the effort on in terms of the public accessing our service, but also how we respond. If we respond in a if we don't, an example is if our response is really needs to be a well thought through response. If it's not a well thought through response, we will the customer may have to come back to us several times to get the answers that they need. So we need to, so it's about reducing the effort our staff take to respond to complaints, and therefore not having this repeat conversation over the complaint, being really clear about what the complaint is and the history of the complaint, knowing the history of the complaint. All of those things are considered in this complaints framework. So it's really reducing effort for staff.
I struggle, to be honest, with that idea of reduce effort in terms of satisfying the customer. What I do get is the principle behind what you're saying is how do we do it once and do it right? I actually suspect that might require more effort on our part, at least if it's thinking power and what is the right solution. But thank you for that advice and clarification. I agree with the direction of travel, even if I'm perhaps less happy with the use of the phrase. Yes, Len.
Can I suggest that an alternative wording might be improved response efficiency, and it reads better than reduce effort?
I'd handle that. That's a good, that's what you should be consulted. That's great. Paku, if you'd be happy with that, I would certainly be much more comfortable for the official record that that's what we're trying to do. Do we have any other questions for Paku, please? We don't. Can we move to the recommendations? Look, just we do, because I recognise we have another vote, another voice, another vote. John, I think you've joined us. Welcome to the meeting. We did pass an apology for your lateness. It's great that you can be here with us. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce.
If you haven't worked up already, we're on item 2.2. So we're about to look at the recommendation, which is that we receive the report. I think implicit, because you've said that in terms of the insurance policy that you require committee approval, implicit in that is that we are agreeing that the sidecar policy go. Correct? Paku, that's what you need. You said you need specific committee approval. Do we need to make an actual resolution on that?
No, actually, that was an error in the report.
Okay.
In fact, we don't need the approval. It's been done, and but
right.
Yes.
Okay, that's good. It still was a good conversation to note that actually there's a little area of risk, and we'll have the bigger risk one going on. So we're back to receiving the report. Thank you. Are you moving the motion, Martin?
So, I mean, they just mentioned sidecar again. Now, I've looked up what sidecar insurance is on Wikipedia, so I kind of understand it, but does everyone else?
I think the point is we don't have sidecar insurance anymore. It's being taken out. I think the broader point that we need to have is the bigger discussion.
Yeah.
Next year when we come with Aon about what is our risk weightings that we want to take on board and what do we want to cover by way of insurance. Well done on doing the Wikipedia. I hadn't realised it was in there. Okay, rightio. Do I have a mover for the motion, please, that we receive the report? Thank you, Len. Thank you, Terry. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, it's carried. Gosh, if I didn't have Donna here, I would die in terms of process. I failed to move a motion that we receive Mr. Teague's presentation. So from the chair, with my apology, I am going to move that we receive it. Thank you, Martin. That you second that. Can I put the motion? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, it's carried. Brilliant. That's good. Right. We could move then on to the health and safety report, please, Paku.
Yes, there's this is our standard report. Look, there's nothing I would like to highlight that needs huge discussion. We've done a bunch of work, and really there's not a great deal that I need to discuss with you today on this report.
Brilliant. So we have questions for Paku here, please. Yes, Mark.
Yeah, so just looking at the first one, the personal confrontation, top of page 27. And I realised back in June there was, in March there was a bow tie risk assessment done, and then in June security contractors were asked for quotes for hardware, and then a recent meeting in September talked about quotes, and then now it's saying quotes have been received and sitting with respective managers. So I have had some questions from customer services staff who are saying, when are these CCTV for our customer services area coming in? And I just wanted to get some assurance that that's reasonably high on the priority of respective managers to action.
We've got our risk owner here. Where's Brian? He's not here.
Just left the room.
Oh, okay.
Through the chair, I think the risk owner in this instance would be could be Lorna, actually, with front facing people. Lorna, are you on the phone?
Lorna is. Can you help see Lorna?
Well, through the chair, what I can say to this is that we are following this up. I know that Will, who is in the room here today, he does follow these actions up with with the respective managers, and they are responsible for this the completion of this work, definitely. So and I'm not sure where it is in the pipeline, but I'm pretty sure it's underway. Will, are you in the room, and do you know exactly where this particular case is at?
Yes, I am in the room, Paku. Through the chair, we're currently the CCTV system, and thank you, Martin, for bringing that up, because we do take that very, very seriously, not just for here, but for throughout our offices. We have reviewed through a demo system the system we are looking at, and we appear quite happy with that. There's a number of additional features which we're still working through, but those again are going to be utilised to better help and support anybody coming in. The distress alarm is also part of that. We've reviewed that on demo, and that was done last week. And the screens are all part of the same quotation. Those screens are fixed and much more robust and provide a level and a degree of safety and preventing people from climbing over, as I've demonstrated one time, to get to the staff. They would prevent that. So we are progressing really, really well. The thing that I have learned since being with TCDC is that things take time, because there are a number of processes that you need to go through. So we have gone through those processes. We've dotted the I's and crossed the T's, and everybody seems to be on board now. So we're just waiting now on a couple more questions to be answered by one of the providers. And they replied to my email yesterday saying that the person needed to answer those questions is on leave until next week. But once he's back, then we'll be progressing, and hopefully it'll be happening fairly quickly. In regards to keeping people up to date, I email regularly and I speak to the staff on all areas of customer services, not just here at Thames, but every office, and they all know where we are with it. I've described the system to them, and I keep in touch with them regularly. Indeed, we have a 2-week rotational basis where my colleague, Rebecca Bex, we visit each office every 2 weeks, just to keep an eye on them and make sure they're all right. So we're progressing quite well.
Thank you. That's a very comprehensive assurance you've given. Thank you.
Right, any other questions over the health and safety?
Just one, Bruce. But I was pleased to see the, under the assurance that we've included now, any threats towards staff as being something that we're monitoring. So that was good to see there. Harassment of staff, it can be by a number of ways. It can be directly verbal, and I'm aware of 2 instances where 2 female staff members have been threatened directly verbally, and council has taken quite a good stance over that and put some measures in place to reassure them. There's also another method of harassment which is becoming quite troubling, and that is members of the public directing emails directly at staff members over decisions made by governance. And I don't appreciate that. I think that we need to actually, as a governance team, protect staff from that. And the criticism is often over decisions that we as councillors have made. So I myself, if I'm aware of this happening in my community, I won't tolerate it. I'll expect all such emails to come to me, which I'll then forward on to the CEO. So if other wards are experiencing their ratepayer groups, business associations, or whatever, directing emails to staff members, I would say that they should actually step forward and actually stop that practice straight away, because that is also a form of harassment which does affect staff. Anyway, Pākehā, my point was, I'm pleased to see it there. I'm pleased to see we're addressing it, and thank you for that.
Interesting point, actually, and it goes with the LTP. I think, John, this is the second conversation that I've heard in the last 48 hours about actually effectively government stepping up to the plate in terms of ownership of decisions, as in contrast to the impact on staff. I won't go into the background of that. That's private.
There's a continuation on that. We had the acting community board chair, the deputy chair, sent an email and copied in some staff, which he raised some matters which had been agreed with by the community board. And she's not here, I see, but Aileen responded to councillors saying she wasn't going to deal with that. It's inappropriate to copy in staff. Well, who the hell do you copy? You know, they're elected members. It just seems nonsense that the staff, it's an email, they can consider it and pass it on to the appropriate person. How do you get it out there?
Through the chair,
Sorry, go for it, Donna, then we'll go Lee.
okay, through the chair, I think the email in question was actually sent to a staff member, not copied in.
So just to endorse firstly what Don was saying, and Donna, the email in question was sent directly to a staff member, and it related to decisions made by the governance team. It should have been directed to me to begin with, and then it should have been disseminated or distributed amongst the governance team, not directed at staff, because they're governance decisions.
I think that people need to know that, because it was done in a goodwill approach by the individual, and now he's concerned. What can you do? And we need to tell people. You can't just say, I thought it was quite rude, the response. I would have thought it would have been appropriate to say it's better to do it. This is the way we require it. I've not seen any of that direction before.
So with respect, Councillor Gottlieb, you've been a councillor for many years, and as has Councillor Walker, I would have thought you knew the process. You've been through many LTPs before. You would have known the process and would have been able to guide the acting community board chair in the right direction.
If I can just speak to it quickly, the discussion around the LTP was held by the Dean Allen, the manager of the area managers, and he said this is the staff response to the LTP that he spoke to. So he spoke to this group as the staff response. It wasn't from governance response.
Okay, look, I think we're talking about health and safety first and foremost, and I think we need to reflect. I don't hear anything in this conversation necessarily that actually staff well-being should be at the centre of our discussion. I think there's a different discussion that has to happen, which is probably not directly in this risk and assurance line. It might well be when you have your LTP. How do you have these communications that are going right that protect staff? I'm not going to go into the other conversation I had, but I am very conscious that staff sometimes are silent sufferers, and we need to recognise that in terms of your point, original point, the principle. How do we as governors hold our weight in the discussion as in contrast to throwing it onto staff? Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for raising that, John. A couple of questions from me, please, Paku. You know, I sometimes, I don't know, I'm about to say my eyes glaze over. That's terrible. Perhaps I should, it's a Freudian slip. When I go through the list here of the critical risks, I think, gee, can I quite remember what it is? And I'm trying to look at some changes here, and I must confess that, Donna, probably I should ask you, the ELT sponsor. Can you explain for me what is asset failure? It's either big or it's small, and I think it's bigger, and I'm just wondering whether we've got a full and complete response here for what we should be doing around a critical risk, which is asset failure. Oh, you're on mute there, Paku.
Through the chair, I can answer that. So asset failure is any asset that we own that put ourselves, our workers at risk, and including those assets that we also have out in the public domain. An example, I will give an example, might be a simple example is the carpet in our on our stairwells. If it's lifting, it could cause a trip hazard. So it's any asset that we use in our day-to-day work and it fails and our staff are at risk due to that failure.
So I take on board, Paku, that this is describing proactive action undertaken, which is great. And I love the fact that we've got ELT sponsors, you know, which is a good commitment by ELT to be in the health and safety game. Is there a planned program of proactive action to be undertaken? You understand what I'm saying? We receive this as action that has, passed, it's now happened. What are we doing in the future? Because I look at something like asset failure, and so we've inspected playgrounds, and we've looked at the transfer station. Absolutely critical stuff. Don't have any trouble. Tick, tick, great. That's good. What else are we doing?
Through the chair, I think this comes down to
We just lost you again, Paku. You've got your mute on.
Through the chair, this comes down to our asset management plans, and like we wouldn't be able to report on all of the asset management plans that are asset actions that are happening on a day-to-day basis by our asset owners, and that's in terms of fixing buildings, fixing leaking roofs, and all those sorts of things. But what I can say is that we are focused on the risk areas, the critical risk areas within asset failure areas. On top of that, one of the areas that we're really interested in is the reporting of issues that public put through service risk requests and such. So we are looking to try to use that volume of information to be able to respond to specific areas that are of concern. Yeah, that's all I can say to that.
Brilliant. Look, that's really helpful. The other, my final question, Paku, was look at, we've tried to look at the stats and do a quick summary in my head. There seems to be less incidents reported in the last quarter. And I'm just trying to understand why. That's a good sign in one sense. If we're not having accidents, perhaps that suggests our policies are working. But I just wondered whether you had any thought or summary comment on the level of incidences or near miss reporting in the last quarter. You might even want to say, Bruce, you're wrong. Actually, it is normal. I'm interested to know.
Well, it's normal. It's interesting because if you have a look at the years before, this is a time where it is historically quiet, and I can't, I don't have a rhyme or answer for that. I mean, obviously summer, coming into the summer months, people are a bit more active. And so you could imagine that that is a seasonal thing, that there will be more incidents occurring over the summer months. But if you look historically, and I do know that this time of the year there are less incidents. I must say that we are looking forward to having a new vault system in place. And look, I've made it quite clear to the leadership team that I've always been sort of concerned about and I know Brian will support me in this, is the Brian Taylor rather, is the potentially people not reporting lower levels of reporting due to just the ease of the system that we use. So I'm just going to let you know that we're getting a new system in place. I think it's easier to use, I think, and more intuitive. And I think that you are going to see a change in the level of incidents that are going to be reported, just as a heads up.
Brilliant. No, that's great. Look, it's you know, we're trying to interpret statistics, and you know that actually has its own problems. But it is interesting, as I said, when I sat back and looked at the bigger picture, you know, other than what John's already mentioned around personal confrontation, it seems reasonably quiet. And actually, I just leave it as a comment. One of the things that I know certainly from elsewhere around the country we've been doing is perhaps trying to anticipate what is the likely pressure on our health and safety over the coming summer months. You've mentioned that when we're active, and the need to think about that, but I'll leave it there. Terry, you've got a question?
Just a quick comment. I just wonder, Paku, if it was the program we had this year is a lot lighter than last year, and we put a lot of energy into roading and things like that. Maybe that's had a reflection through the amount of accidents. It has been quite dramatically reduced, the actual work program.
Potentially, Councillor. The other thing is, I must say that our health and safety team have been doing a lot of work in terms of how can I put this? Reviewing our buildings, reviewing the area, reviewing how we review our offices, our office environments. They've been doing a lot of work in terms of supporting staff around their homework office setups, and all those sorts of things do contribute to reducing the level of incidents that might occur, raising awareness across the organisation. Certainly they send out a lot of periodicals around some of the hazards that have been that have occurred. So it's also about our health and safety team really being onto it and raising the profile of health and safety so that people do consider that, and hopefully that's having an effect on how many incidents that actually do occur.
Yes, let's take some credit. It could well, you know, it's a bit of everything. So I'm sure that's part of that, which is superb. So thank you for that. Yes, Martin.
Yes, I mean, my apologies for not pointing this out earlier, and it might have meant it could have been included, but in previous the Appendix 1, the incident dashboards, in previous meetings where we've been given these, they've had a major incident summary and a trend analysis commentary at the bottom, but the one this time at page 30 doesn't seem to have that on there. Is that a change in how we're doing it, or was there just nothing to put in there?
Through the chair, no, there is one incident in there, and it's in September, but the others were so this was a near on or in water incident, and could I ask Will just to comment on that one, because that's really the only one in that period that needs to be highlighted. So Will, do you want to just briefly, very briefly, explain what that?
Shot through.
Oh, okay. Okay, so let me just tell you what that incident was. That was an incident down at the Kopu Marina with our contractor, and look, they put their hand up there was it was a near miss, a significant near miss, that they sorted immediately. And it was to do with the work they're doing at the, on the wharf. And Will went down to discuss it with them and was right across that particular incident. So yes, that's what that was about.
Yeah, sorry, I guess my question is, there didn't seem to be even a thing in there saying that there wasn't anything, or like an analysis of the trend in that, and that's kind of what we've had before. So I just wondered, I found those few lines at the bottom of this table quite instructive, because it gives you a little bit more detail. So I just hope that that's not a permanent omission, and that those will appear again.
Through the chair, councillor, yes, no, we'll make sure that they are in there going forward.
I think that's a really helpful suggestion. We should be looking forward. Oh, sorry, Rita.
Hi, Paku. Just quickly, I have a question. I'm just trying to understand the incident report as well. And I look at the personal confrontation column, and for staff, I'm really saddened to see how high that number is. But I want to understand, we talk about, we have a measure there of 5 incidents for the public. So are they measured from the public being sort of in our playgrounds and things like that? How is that data captured?
Okay, through the chair, those incidents are observed incidents. So in terms of staff, in terms of public, it could be a situation that has played out in one of our facilities, where there might be an argument between 2 public members, or it could be a fight just outside of our doors. So that's the sort of stuff that they're capturing. That is captured in our incident reporting tool as a near miss. The thing is when there's a situation that plays out between members of the public, in our near where our workers are, it could affect how they themselves, how they feel about the situation. So a prime example is that we had a person come through the facility yelling, but not at any particular person. So went through the library, started yelling, but not actually at anybody. But it has affected the staff in a way.
Okay, thank you.
Does it help? Yeah, thank you. Good question, actually, because it says we report what we observe. This is why I go back to I support Paku in principle, saying we need a system that enables easy recording.
Yes.
So that we have probably a better picture, but actually it also means then that I presume Paku and Will can start to drive preventative stuff. That's the value of the near miss information. That's great. Can we move to the recommendation, please, which is that we receive Paku and Will's report? Do I have a mover and a seconder, please?
I'll move it.
Thank you, John. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Rika. We'll put the motion then that we receive the report. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, it's carried. Thank you. Radio, I'm going to declare a quick break for morning tea. I am 5 minutes behind time. I thought I was going to be on time. Donna, I know you're breathing down my neck. Hey, look, we do have a bit to get going, and I'm conscious you've got an LTP workshop this afternoon or something this afternoon at 1. So can we make it? We're back here in 10 minutes at 1:30, please. I need to keep to the original timescale.